Welcome to the STABcast, a podcast dedicated to Star Wars Legion. Welcome, cadets and commanders, to the STABcast, the Sunsphere Tactical Attack Brigade's Legion podcast. I'm Ryan, pushing your Luke off the table, Slowoski, joined by Ben, why won't your Veers just die Fowler, and Will, and there's something about Orcs Heim. How we doing tonight, fellas?
Doing well.
I'm super excited for Gen Con.
Yeah, that makes two of us. That absolutely makes two of us.
This week on STABcast, battle reports from our Fun to the Tables, a continued look at Turn Zero, and much, much more.
So, between now and our last episode, we had the esteemed privilege of going down to Chattanooga to compete in the American Team Classic, which is a big Warhammer event, and they're trying to get their toes wet with running some Legion. They've been running a little X-Wing in the past, and they decided to drop X-Wing and bring Legion on since it's a little more in line with a lot of the other games they played. It was a very small turnout. There were 4 teams. We played 1,000 points, and 2 people to a team running 2 500-point lists. So obviously, me and Ben went down. Chase, my partner from the team event we got to play at Adepticon when the game launched, was the TO for the event, so it was good to see him. Little sad he couldn't be my teammate, but that'll be recovered soon at Gen Con. We went down and played with our Sunsphere South team of Brett and Drew, who are frequenters of our local tournaments, a group from North Georgia, a father-son duo who came and just gotten into the game and wanted to come out and play, and then the Mustafar Misfits of Jagged Brush Studios and Dan Wolf Games. I know Jagged Brush sponsored a contest where we gave away some minis, and you've probably seen on them some of their stuff on our Twitter feed. They came and played as well, and it was a really good day.
I think so, but I'm not chopped liver. I'm not Chase, but fun times were had. I think the list building part made this a very different setup. Since I had to have 500 points and Ryan had to have 500 points, and we both had to have commanders in our list, it meant that you couldn't I couldn't spend 400 points on my list and then give Ryan the extra 100.
Right.
Bringing in large units a little bit harder. Grouping was a little different.
Yeah, but I think we came out with a pretty good army.
Oh, no, I think we came up with a fantastic army. Probably we should describe it.
Yeah, I guess we should. I was playing Luke Skywalker with push and reflexes, leading 2 sets of fleet troopers with environmental gear, the shotgun guy, the extra body, and concussion grenades, alongside an ATRT with the heavy ATRT cannon, and another group of just 4 rebel troopers.
Where I was playing Leia, and I was playing 3 rebel troopers with Z6s, and then 2 ATRTs with the heavy laser cannon. We were expecting a lot of impact. I didn't have enough points to throw impact grenades to my troopers, but we were looking to have to shoot down big weapons because of the 1,000-point list.
Yeah, I thought with the higher point value, we might see some more ATSTs or some more airspeeders. And there were no ATSTs to be had, a little shockingly.
Just 1 airspeeder.
So, Ben, how did we do in our first game?
So the first game was against our North Georgia Mountain Raiders, the father-son group, whose name I know I wrote down, so I'm going to apologize because they said they would be listening to this podcast and could not find it in time for the episode. They had an interesting list. Dad was an Imperial player, but the son was a Rebel player. And so the dad said, all right, we'll play Rebels. He was unhappy about it for most of the day. He's like, well, if we'd played Empire, that wouldn't have happened here.
Yeah, it was pretty funny.
Our list looked a lot like ours. They had a Leia, they had a Luke, lots of troopers around. They flew the airspeeder really well. They knew we had the heavy laser cannons. They knew we were going to shoot at it the moment we could. We're playing limited visibility with battle lines and breakthrough. So if they got the airspeeder on our side and we didn't kill it, it was going to sit there and gain points. And so they flew it really well, kept it out of our range for the entire time. We had some bad bag draws. We grabbed the wrong tokens at the wrong times.
The bag was brutal to us.
Spent a lot of time just backing ATRTs up. Like, well, I don't have anything to shoot, so I'm just going to walk backwards and taking a dodge token if we had to. They did a really good job of keeping us out of the enemy deployments. We didn't get to the other side until the very last round.
It was tough.
It was tough. I became the Ryan in this team event. I'm like, but I want to shoot it. It's over there. Let me shoot that thing. Please, can I shoot that thing? And Ryan's like, no, Ben, let us think about the objective use. I'm like, oh, you're right. And so,
yeah, it was pretty funny.
Eventually, we blew all the stuff that we needed to, had some good dice rolls, had some very, very good play, stepped over and won. I think it was 3 victory points to 1 or 0 because we shot that last guy at the very end.
Yeah, I felt kind of bad about that, but you know, you've got to play for the points, even if you've kind of got the game, and they managed to rush. It was probably the funniest point of the day for me, and I felt a little bit bad. But they had managed to rush one of their troopers down into our deployment zone since we were playing battle lines and camp out there with just the unit leader left. And he was the first one to score points. He got over there pretty early. He got himself into a defensive position. But then on the last turn, we held to the end of the game Leia's spaceship card, coordinated bombardment, and we moved her to score a point in their objective zone, in their deployment zone, where she had line of sight to their lone little trooper, and we shot him with a spaceship.
Picked him right off. Pink.
Yeah. So it was pretty sad. They played a really good game. It was the best airspeeder I've ever seen played. Can't state that enough. While they did play the airspeeder really well, you saw a couple other cues that maybe they weren't the most experienced players. Not to say that they weren't good, but Legion has a very different tempo to it. And so they activated a lot of their units in a very strange order. And they didn't quite have the timing of like when the game was going to end or when troops needed to be in certain places and how their timing would get messed up by suppression.
Yeah, if we were playing a 7-round game, I think they win that.
Yeah, I do too.
He thought he had one more round. And he didn't.
Well, it's because we only played 5 and time got called. And they thought they were going to get the 6th round in. But that's how it goes. I think if you give these guys a couple more events under their belt, I think they'll be absolutely terrifying players. They were really good, really fun, good sports. Fun game.
Next year, Dad swears they're coming back, but they're bringing the Imperial flag this time.
I'd love to see it. I'd absolutely love to see it. Will, how'd your round 1 go?
Well, I spent most of their round 1 watching, but eventually I did get to play my Shadespire match.
Yep, and no one cares. So round 2. Ben, who'd we play for round 2?
So round 2, we played Sunsphere South, Drew and Brett. Great guys. I love to see them come up here, mostly because I love to beat them down. They're running 3 ATRTs. They're running Luke, Leia, 2 fleet troopers, 3 rebel troopers. Their ATRTs, I think, 2 were flamers?
It was pretty much the exact same composition as our list, just different upgrades.
Yeah, I think 2 were flamers and 1 was a Gatling gun, which was interesting.
Yeah, and then they had Z6s on all of their troopers.
They did.
With the extra points that they saved.
So the game went well. We were playing well. And then Ryan pulled me aside. He's like, hey, Ben, do you see what I see? And I said, oh, my God, I do see what you see. And I said, should we do that? That feels awfully dirty. Is it going to demoralize them if we do that? Because I think of the people. I think of their feelings and their emotion.
I don't.
And Ryan, who's like, no, he does not. Ryan's like, it might, but I think we can do it. So I said, let's do it and let's try it. So Ryan, what did we do?
So they had put their Luke near the board edge to kind of flank around this building at the start of round 2. And I pull Ben aside and say, hey, what if we burn Son of Skywalker to move our Luke up, push their Luke off the board with force push, and then just take 2 little measly pistol shots with Luke's pea shooter and say it's not the greatest use of Son of Skywalker, but it gets a Luke off the board and some damage down. And so we decided we were going to try to go for it. And the last activation of turn 2, when we're kind of planning on doing this, or close to the end of the activation phase, they moved another set of rebel troopers up to a place to where Luke can leap, move, charge, hit the rebel troopers, and push Luke off the board. So that option became just way too tasty. And the reason I didn't feel too bad about it was they had made note that we had push and that their Luke didn't. And I heard Brett say to Drew, like, hey, we have to be careful. He can push our troops off the board. And then we pushed not their troops off the board, but we pushed their commander off the board.
And I hate to hurt Brett, because Brett's a great friend of the podcast, great friend of ours. And I could just see the hurt in his eyes. It deflated them pretty hard. Now, they still came back, and I still think they had a chance to win.
They absolutely did.
I think some dice change. They could probably still have pulled that out. But it's real deflating to lose Luke on turn 2.
They lost him at the first activation of turn 3. Yeah. The other thing that really helped put us ahead in that game, even more than the Luke play, was we brought 3 ATRTs with heavy laser cannons that just melted their ATRTs, and we won the vehicle fight. So our troopers could trade pretty evenly, and even though the heavy laser cannon isn't particularly good against trooper units, we still had access to lots of suppression once their ATRTs got melted, and we didn't have to play around their flamethrowers.
Absolutely. With the heavy laser, you're so far away, we could probably damage them before they could even get into range 3 of anything. It was nice. Will, how was your round 2?
Yeah, after round 1, I was psyched up. I was playing a guy who works at Dice Head, so we got set up, and then he was using his dwarf team, the Chosen Axes.
Nobody cares. All right, so round 3, we got to play the Mustafar Misfits. Good friends of the show, Dustin and Daniel. They were running the only Imperialist on the day, running Vader Veer's triple bikes that were terrifying, and 6 sets of Stormtroopers.
I'll be honest with you, I thought we had lost this one in turn 2. Those bikes came around, walloped the bejesus out of us. I mean, they just ate through troopers, decimated it. The fleet trooper that we had, the group over there, I thought for sure we were goners. I really did. And then the thing is, they weren't able to take out full units. So you'd be left with a couple of guys. Well, you always save the heavy.
Right.
So next thing you know, it's a trooper leader with his shotgun, and the trooper leader's throwing a grenade, and those bikes just melted. And then it came out there. This is one of those times, I'll be honest with you, Ryan saw something that I clearly didn't see. And I was like, come on, I really think I should do this. This will tie up Vader. It'll make us do this thing. He's like, no. And he pulled me aside. We turned around so they couldn't read our lips. And I was like, oh, I didn't even see it. Like it was a battlefield position. We put an ATRT between troopers and an objective token, which means they were going to have to walk around my ATRT, and the geometry meant that they weren't going to be able to get there and do it in a single turn, which meant they probably weren't going to be able to do it before the end of the game.
We found a place on the last round where their troopers were just going to move and pick up a box, and we found a spot where we could move our ATRT, who had been disabled for both of his actions, to be able to sit on top of a couple of troopers but not displace the unit leader. So they take the suppression. He can put his squaddies back into cohesion however he wants. But then he's not going to be able to make that beeline straight over our ATRT to get to the last crate. And I think that was the move that sealed the game for us. Otherwise, it was a close game. I thought we were going to go down. It was an absolute nail biter. The other funny thing about the game was Veers. How many times did we shoot that Veers?
We had to have shot him 10 individual shots across 3 rounds. I don't know that Veers had damage before the end.
He was on 1 or 2 health, but he had 6 suppression tokens on him at one time.
He just dodged everything we threw at him. Well, we had some bad dice where you don't get all the hits you want. But every time we turned around, Veers was like, no, I don't think I'm going to die this day.
The crazy thing is that Dustin, I played him today, and his Veers is still stupid lucky. I shot him probably 5 or 6 times like y'all did, and the guy just stood there and was like, no, I do not feel like dying right now.
Yep.
Today is not that day. I will say a great thing that we did is that we pulled a lot of hate to Luke on one side of the board, and Luke wasn't near anything. You had, 3 sets of troopers over there in Vader?
Yeah.
And they just kept tangoing with Luke the entire time.
Yeah, we eventually did lose Luke, but by that point, everything had been tied up long enough.
Most of the objectives were on the left-hand side of the board as we were looking at it. And so having Luke over there just to tie up half an army by himself. I think we had 1 supporting trooper with you, but...
Yeah, but he was on his way to just kind of flank to get an objective and just look like he was going to help Luke. Luke pulled a bunch of people his direction with him and then disengaged using force push in some really clever ways to try to get where he needed to be to extend his range bubble to some cool places. Overall, at this event, I don't want to toot my horn too much. My brain broke with, I think maybe it was just the increased army sizes, I think was definitely part of it. But I have never had so many cool, unique ways to use force push. I think we used it really well throughout the day in all of our games, creating engagements that are really valuable just to us. Not just obviously with the push off the board, but we used it a couple other really cool ways to push people off of objectives or push people into engagements that maybe with units they've already activated. So they're just kind of tied up and they don't want to waste their actions punching these 2 troopers that are left. Cool stuff like that.
Being more objective based in the play, I was doing things, I'm like, well, is that the most effective? And it was, but it didn't involve shooting every time. Sometimes I was shooting just to put suppression on something. I wasn't really trying to kill, or I was trying to deflect or trying to make an opponent look at me when Ryan was over there doing something else. I really like the team event style. I really did.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Will, how'd you end up with Shadespire?
Well, after a tough matchup against the Skaven, which I really don't pair well against.
No one cares. They're giant rats. Nobody cares. But you did do well in Shadespire. Am I not wrong? Am I correct?
Yeah, I ended up 3rd place out of 15 or 16.
Yeah, you can't complain about that. We're glad you got to go and play this other silly game and have some fun. Me and Ben did get to take the top spot. ATC gave some great prize support, so we're definitely going into next year going to be trying to hype them up a lot. People travel from all over the country to play in their Warhammer events here in little Chattanooga, Tennessee, so we would love to try to grow Legion from just 2 or 3 tables to maybe 5 or 6 next year would be awesome. So if you got any interest in it, please let us know. We'd love to get you connected and hooked up to come down next year. And it's usually always the second or third weekend in July.
So today was our weekly scheduled event. And normally I'm the tournament organizer, put these things together. And I helped set up the maps last night. I think they looked good when we left last night. But my godson's birthday party was today. So I didn't want to anger his mother. Because if I anger her, then I never see the godson again. She just takes me out in the street and kills me like a dirty dog. So I didn't get to play. I showed up after the birthday party and their last round here. So you won't hear much from me today. But, gentlemen, how did it go?
Yeah, we only had 4 players show up. It was a weird weekend right before Gen Con. Everybody was out doing stuff. Ben was at a birthday party. We had a couple other people have family engagements come up. So it was really small turnout. But that doesn't mean we didn't have fun. We set up 4 boards. So every game during our 2-game round robin or 2-game elimination, we got to play on a different map. So that was fun. I got to play one of our local players who doesn't get to make it out too often, but he's a mainstay of the Knoxville tabletop community in Landon. We got to play capture supplies on clear conditions with major offensive. I've only gotten to play Landon a couple times before, and he doesn't get to come out a whole lot. And I will say, from the last game that I got to play with him a couple weeks ago, he put up one heck of a fight. Like, I really thought at a couple points during that game he had me. We were playing Recover Supplies. I managed to claim 3 of the boxes, but 2 of the boxes I had were in really sticky situations, while the 2 that he got to claim were really pretty much just his for a good portion of the map. Like, I had a very tough time pressuring them, but I did have the advantage. One of the things, and I think the only thing that really saved the game for me, is it cost me my Luke, but I got to put my Luke and a couple troopers in a place to where his Vader was having to wander back and forth and kind of ending up in the same place and backtracking and then moving again. He was very uncommitted with where he wanted his Vader to go and what he wanted him to do. I kept him away from getting Vader to pressure my boxes, my box carriers. And so that's, I think, what turned the game for me. Even though he had way more of my army destroyed than I did his, I managed to pull one more box down in the end, and it was a really good close game. Given Landon a couple more games under his belt, a little more experience, he's going to be able to really crush some players. And if he continues at the same speed to improve from the last couple times we've played, he'll be a scary opponent.
Landon and I had a really good game this past Tuesday. He had a night available, and I knew I couldn't play on Wednesday, our normal night. And yeah, it was a very tough game. I thought he was going to win for the first 3 rounds, and I was able to kind of pull it out there at the very end. He's going to get there, I think so.
For my round 1, I was playing Dustin from Jagged Brush and the Mustafar Misfits and all that. It's always good to see him make the drive up from Marival. For our objective cards and all that, we actually ended up using all the new cards from the priority supplies. It just worked out that way. So there's minefields and moisture evaporators in the city, which we agreed were fire hydrants. And then we're also scouting around, so it was all kinds of craziness. Because of how we placed the moisture evaporators, I did end up with a little bit of an advantage on deployment. Basically, 3 were on the right half of the board, which is where on my right side of the board. With the scout moves and everything, I got set up pretty well so that my bikes could take out his troopers before they got to the fire hydrants, where mine could kind of stay back, fix mine, and then keep moving forward to pressure him. His Veers did roll a bunch of blocks, though. He had an ATST, and we're going to talk about the unit on its own later, but really it just doesn't have much of an impact in games like this. It kind of sat there, and it threw a bunch of dice at Vader, but nothing really happened. Like, Vader took a couple wounds, but that was about it. And I think that point sink really kind of set him back. Ran out of time on turn 5, ended up being a 4-2 victory for me.
Nicely done. And, with me winning my round 1, And you winning your round one, Will. What does that mean?
Means it was time for a STABcast face-off.
Which honestly, like, for how our schedules tend to line up, and we tend to always make the same, even just casual nights, the three of us don't get to play each other very often. You're probably some of the opponents I've played the least amount.
I think I played you once, 3 weeks ago?
Something like that.
And before that, it'd been probably a month and a half. And I think it was a 500-point game the last time you and I played.
And the last time I got to play Will was at our last monthly tournament.
Yeah, I don't know the last time I played you, Ben.
I think we like to share our love with the outside world, not just within the closed group.
We spread our various talents. Yeah, Ryan and I were playing to see who got the illustrious prize of an extra aim token.
Yeah, the number broke down to where whoever won the tournament got one extra aim token.
As well as some bragging rights, which Ryan always enjoys.
I do.
Really, it's the bragging rights is all Ryan really wants. He'll take acrylic, but if he can get a bragging right, that's all that's worth it for him.
Y'all know me too well.
We were playing Major Offensive, Recover Supplies, and Rapid Reinforcements, which both of us did not put anything into reinforcements, so it was essentially clear conditions.
Which is the exact same setup I got to play with Landon, oddly enough.
Ah, so that's why you won. You had practice.
Oh, spoilers!
Oh, I'm so sorry. I definitely had an advantage on deployment. My side of the board had this big, leafy area terrain with trees in it that is now light cover. So I kind of got to hang back and then put my Speed 1 units in it that didn't care about the rough ground, where a lot of Ryan's units had to kind of trek through open terrain, but at the same time I wasn't pressuring him as much, so I think he didn't get punished as much for crossing open terrain. I did get a lot of block results when Ryan used his Leia for orbital nonsense.
By a lot, he means 5 out of 6.
5 out of 6. Ryan, I could tell there was a little salt.
There's a little salt, a little bit.
After that, I really struggled kind of establishing a board presence. My bike squads flew out, but the first one was merely a sacrifice to the Slowoski Special Fleet Trooper unit. They just obliterated them. It wasn't pretty.
It was awesome.
The second group did a good chunk of damage to Leia, which helped set up Veers to kind of punk her off the board in round 2 or 3.
You made mincemeat on my Leia, which most people ignore, so kudos to you.
Yeah, I mean, with the way you had them kind of on each flank, I was like, plus Leia's just terrifying.
And I'll be honest, because I watched most of their game, because after the birthday party, I showed up and they were starting their game. I thought you put Veers in a really nice spot.
You did. Absolutely you did.
You used him to shoot more than just command.
And I think a lot of people play Veers kind of cautiously, but if you're doing that, you're not taking advantage of a lot of his abilities, honestly.
Sharpshooter 1, Pierce 1 you can't be ignored.
I mean, he's no Leia. He doesn't get the 3 black dice, but if you're passing out an aim and can give one to himself with the precise, he can usually get a couple hits through. Neither of us really pushed across the middle of the board. We kind of met there and had this big, awful meat grinder. But in the end, I really couldn't keep up with that. My groups were just getting shredded. Vader put up one heck of a fight in the middle of the board. Got this massive Master of Evil that passed out like, I don't even know how many suppression.
I think it was 15 suppression tokens.
Yeah, it was gross. Only one group ran away, but it was cool to see.
And you ended up getting Luke out of it. I did lose both of my commanders that game. It was tough.
But at the same time, you were trading those to make sure you had the objective advantage.
Yeah.
Which, in the end, is how you win. So Ryan did take the victory 2-0. At the start of turn 6, we both called it because all I had was a Stormtrooper squad left.
Yeah, well, Will was taking a lot of his energy into my commanders early on. I got to whittle some of his cores down, and then I think he played his bikes a little recklessly to where they hit about a turn before the rest of the army. So there was a good probably 6 activations where they were really the only option I had to really shoot at. And I got his bikes down without them doing too much damage. And then I still got my fleet troopers into a good spot before they got rather annihilated. We kind of traded our supports. You got both my ATRTs pretty early, one of them before it even shot. I got both of your bikes pretty early after only one of them had really managed to do any real damage. And so then it just became kind of a trooper commander square off, and you managed to get Luke and Leia, I think before I got either of your commanders, and then I took a shot in the dark with 2 white dice and 2 red dice from a 2-man fleet trooper squad into a Veers who just bottomed his rollout and managed to snipe him and then put all the rest of my energy into Vader, and it became, like 4 or 5 squads of troopers, wounded and battered troopers against one. And I managed to pull the game, but it was close. It was a really close game until it wasn't. It just kind of had this weird tipping point.
It was around round 4. You killed my guys that were holding crates where I couldn't really reach yours, and that kind of decided it, I think.
Yeah. It was a really fun tournament, even though it was small. We played pretty slow. Like, we gave since there was only 4 of us, we took lots of time to set up and chit-chat, and it was really casual. It was a good time, had by all. We hope for our final kit of the recruitment kit, where we're going to hand out the suppression tokens and the assault cards, we can draw a big crescendo of players. But even with 4, it was a lot of fun, and at least the 2 games that I got to play were really close. And so it was a good day at Legion.
Be on the lookout for the posting for that event. It should be probably mid to late August is when it'll be. We'll probably post it after Gen Con.
So with all that being said, let's move on to our turn 0, the last of our battlefield cards. Let's continue that conversation. So Will, what's the deployment card we have this week?
This week we're looking at Advanced Position, the new deployment card out of Priority Supplies. It's interesting. Actually, today was my first game with it, so I'm glad I got some experience before we talked about it. It's like if you take battle lines and shift the whole thing counterclockwise. It's odd to get used to. The one thing I don't like about it is it really slows down deployment. You and your opponent are back and forthing, like doing all these one-speed moves and kind of having to guess and see what the other's planning, and it did make for a slow setup, but after that, if you do it right, it lets you set up some really cool possibilities with objectives and all sorts of things, so I really like it as a card.
If you're on the far ends, it is much farther than Long March, because you're only, a 1 range from the edge. So did you find yourself kind of pushing as many guys as you could towards the middle, so you at least cross the middle there?
Well, another thing you have to remember is that when you place objectives, you can place them a lot closer now, since it's not Long March that far ahead when you do those objectives. Like when I was talking about the game with the fire hydrants, essentially, a lot of my moisture evaporators were tucked into that kind of zone, like at the right angle of my L-shaped deployment. So that's why I had the advantage, because I kind of got my guys there before he got his guys across the board.
In one way, it almost feels like it makes the map bigger. Even though you do get to scout out, since you can really spread those objective tokens out if it's something that lets you put down tokens. So as long as it's not like intercept transmissions, it can mean that they are a lot further apart from one another. So it makes the battleground itself feel a little bit bigger.
Yeah, I can't imagine doing this one with Breakthrough.
Keep walking. That's where I think you would put everyone in the middle of the map as best you can, and then try to rush to that opposite corner, like you would fight over the dead center. I think with the right objective, I think any of your capture supplies kind of things that could work out really well. Maybe intercept transmissions, because you'll clearly have one in the dead center that you're going to push towards. And I think that center one would be really hard to take because you have so few troops that close. Like everyone who's further out, because you can't fit that many in a 6-inch line. You fit, 2 sets of troopers there?
Maybe 3, depending on how you figure cohesion. But if you're going to do 3, you're being really intentional that I want to do 3 right there. It's an odd duck. It feels kind of like Will alluded to, the redheaded stepchild of Long March and battle lines. I think it's a love or hate deployment. You either really like it or you really don't. I've only got 2 games on it. I think I like it. And I think this one is going to be another one kind of like Long March, that when you're building your table, you've got to keep in mind. I think the table can kind of make or break it. But as someone who likes to run, 6 cores and 2 commanders who are troopers and then maybe some special forces soon, I think it can be really handy. It gives you a big, big advantage when early deploying out. I like it quite a bit because of that big factor, but like Will said, it can slow the game down because it almost makes it feel like a 7-turn game because deployment can take so long.
So I would think with a bike-heavy list, you could kind of zoom out and snipe off the front guys because it's harder to get all of them bunched together without taking as much return fire.
That may be a possibility. I definitely need to get some more reps under my belt with this one before I can make some true determinations on. It's in my battle card deck right now because I hate Long March. We'll see how long it stays there.
Yeah, I've taken out Long March as well. That's the one I put in his place.
So our final objective is going to be secure/sabotage or repair/sabotage the moisture evaporators. It's a neat little objective where you put out these 4 pieces, objectives that you have to play tug of war over. Ben, what's your impressions?
I like it. I immediately took out key positions. I replaced this. I didn't even blink twice on it. I like his placement restrictions. It pushes things far enough away. You can't be at range 1 of another one. You have to be at range 2, which is a healthy amount of distance. The ability to fix it, like to repair for the ones that you get to keep, you get to balance that score because they only take score at the end of that mission. So I like it. It's an immediate replacement for me in the deck. Will, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, it was an immediate replace for me. I just think key positions is not working as it should right now. So I got some experience before this came out with Ryan on Tabletop Simulator. And this one really favors lists that have a lot of actions. And in that game, Ryan made sure I did not have actions to spare.
As I tend to do.
Suppression control, things like that. If you can pin your opponent down and make sure he has to spend his activations, like single moving or spending a lot of time getting the objectives while not shooting you, you can definitely control your opponent on this one a lot more than with other objectives involving actions like recover supplies and things like that.
To rephrase kind of what Will said, it makes actions matter, kind of like hostile environment does. It means you have to be very aware of what you're doing, when you're spending your actions, when suppression matters, and it kind of counters the way key positions and secure the transmissions play, and it gives you a lot of variety because those are very passive. You just kind of have to stand near stuff, and your actions don't matter as much. That you don't have to waste them. You don't have to have that economy. And this sits on the other side, kind of with breakthrough, where you have to focus on moving, and recover supplies, where you have to grab and run away and defend. And I think it creates a really interesting dichotomy.
I think I'm with you on this. I like that the action that you're going to want to do is not to shoot. I mean, don't get me wrong. I like kill games. I like being able to, let's attack everything. But it changes the way you think about it when you realize shooting's not the best option for me here. I need to fix that moisture evaporator. So the final condition that we're going to talk about today is Minefield. I love this card. I got to play with Landon last week. I love the idea of it. It created a giant no-go zone for troopers and ground vehicles. And of course, he's playing the Empire, so his little bike's like, whee, gonna fly all over it. It changed the map after we saw it, and we both tried to influence it. And it created this no man's zone that we were all going to die in the middle of the battlefield. And so it created this channel that we had to run up the sides with. Definitely made me look at it differently. He took his bikes through the minefield, lit me up. I had one unit with just a single unit leader left. And I realized if I double moved, I could throw myself onto one of the mines, activating it if I rolled luckily enough, and then also damaging the bikes at the same time because they were within range 1 of it. So that's exactly what I did. Just threw myself in that mine, exploded it, took a bike right off the table. It was fantastic. Changed the board for me. I like this one.
Yeah, like you said, bikes for the Imperials are really great on this map. I really like it. I've seen a lot of interesting choices made on it. Like whether you kind of skirt the edges or if you just throw yourself in and say, let's see what happens. Played a local guy new to the area. His name's Matt. And while we were playing this, he was quoting the Soviets with like, quantity has a quality all its own while throwing his rebel troopers into these mines.
He should know we only quote Sun Tzu around here.
I mean, if you got Khrushchev at your back pushing you forward into the minefield, you get into the minefield. Yeah, for me, it changed my game. Like, if Vader had push, I couldn't have used the edge. He would have just pushed all my units off, and I would have had to run through the minefield. The way it changes your game after everything's put together, I like the fixing of or changing of the map.
Yeah, in my game with Dustin today, we were playing this with the scout deployment. So during deployment, I set off a mine with my scout move.
That's awesome.
And it didn't kill anybody. It just exploded.
That's cool. I think there are two kinds of people when it comes to Minefield. And you learn a lot about your opponent when you play Minefield. Are they the type of person that just kind of runs into it and sees what happens, or maybe tries to detonate it, kind of like Ben did to take other people out because it hits everybody in the area? Or do they try to play really cautiously and skirt around the edge of the detonation zone until it goes off? But I think more importantly about learning about your opponent, I think when you sit down and those mine tokens are settled in their positions and they're near objectives, I think most importantly, you learn a lot about yourself. And that's the real value of Minefield.
What type of person am I?
When you stare into the minefield, it stares back into you.
Let's take a look at our social media. If you take a look at our Instagram, I've got tons of photos from our past tournaments, I actually got some ATC photos I'll throw up there before this podcast launches out. You see some of the great painted sets that we had. And I will say, I really like the tables that we played on at ATC. You can see Dustin Harvey and his Jagged Brush Studio painted models. And then his partner, Dan Wolf, and some of the stuff that he was able to do. I bought one of those while I was at ATC. So take a look at our Instagram. Great photos on there.
Feel free to also check out our Facebook, Twitter, and please give us a rating on iTunes if you're listening through there. We are at STABcast, and now we're also on Spotify as well.
You'll definitely want to follow our Twitter page. I know I will be up at Gen Con at the In-Flight Report, live tweeting the whole thing. I'll try to get as much info for all the other games as I can, but really we're there for Legion. So I'll be sending pictures and announcements as soon as we get them. So keep an eye on our Twitter over on Wednesday night. This coming Wednesday. It'll be awesome. And you can also directly support the podcast by going to our Teespring shirt shop, teespring.com/stores/STABcast. Buy some shirts, help support the show, help provide our hosting costs. It would be most excellent. Or if you want to interact with us directly, send us a question. We are trying to do a Q&A every episode. So we would love some questions to swstabcast@gmail.com. Get us your questions there. You can also find us on the Legion Discord server, although I will be honest, I'm not on there as much as I probably should be. But you can still connect up with us there and ask us any questions. Will, what do we have from our communications from the Outer Rim in our Q&A tonight?
Yeah, we've got a couple of questions tonight. First is from a friend of ours, Eric, up in Wisconsin, the frozen north. He says, "Hey y'all, keep up the great work. I dusted off my T-47 for a game on Monday, just for kicks and giggles, and it actually felt worth the points. I'm not saying I wouldn't have done better with more troopers or ATRTs, but it helped flank some troopers and put 5 or 6 damage into Vader, making him real squishy when loot got to him. Is this a dead end, or could there be a competitive use for the T-47?
All right, it's time to break some hearts. I think something that's 200 points can do some damage to Vader. It can flank some troopers, but I'm not convinced that those 200, 175 plus whatever you put on it points couldn't be put into other places to be more effective. More upgrades onto your ATRTs, another set of troopers, another commander. I think those points can just be more wisely spent. With the new units coming out and a smaller yet more efficient dice pools, as we're going to start to see more, like the Z6 might start to go away in favor of some rebel troopers who throw less dice, but they're better dice that ignore cover. I could see maybe the T-47 becoming a little bit stronger with not everything having impact on it in the new stuff that comes out. It could make a place for it in the meta, but I don't think cover 1 and armor make up the same value that you could get from 2 sets of speeder bikes, because speeder bikes throw almost the same die pool, same number of dice. The dice are a little worse, but they're 90 points, and they still have cover 1, and they don't have armor, but I think they're just way better, way more efficient. The Snowspeeder's big base makes it incredibly easy to block its compulsory moves, and I think you just pay way too much for it. I think it's valuable. I think it can do things. I just don't think it can do 200 points worth of things.
Yeah, that's my issue with it as well. The cover's nice, but with Leia, Veers, Han, the Rebel Commandos, the Imperial Scouts, all getting sharpshooter, that cover's gone. Impact, yeah, it's a little bit harder to get through there, but you'd be surprised. Leia likes to, roll into a crit every now and then. I think you can get lots of damage on it faster than you probably want it to. I think it breaks it probably a little too early of a point. And so when you lose a weapon, heaven forbid it's the big one you put on the ground buzzer in the back. Or if you didn't have it, then now you've got no weapon at all. Maybe you could, but if you're going to play Rebels, I think you get points into better places. I think you put points into the new special forces we're about to get and do just as much damage as you could with that speeder. Will, what's our next letter?
Well, they're not letters, Ben. It's called email.
I'm not that old.
We received a transmission from Brett Renko. He says, as a temporarily former X-Wing player, he says, I was curious to the push tractor beam similarities. Mostly, do you guys believe we'll see a nerf preventing pushing units off of the board? From Brett, Sodium Chloride Renko.
This one's tough. I don't think you should be able to push stuff off the board. I think it creates a negative play experience. I think it really limits your options, even though it is fairly simple to just be kind of cognitively aware, like, I should always remain like 4 inches from the board edge with my unit leaders. But I think it creates a lot of NPEs, a lot of negative play experiences for a relatively like low opportunity cost. With that said, though, as long as that is a legal play to make, I'm going to make it. Maybe that makes me cold-hearted and mean, which I kind of am. But if it's a rule in the game, even though I may not like the rule for different reasons, I'm still going to use it.
I'm with you. I think it's probably a negative play experience. When you lose a commander that way, you don't mind them getting shot. You probably put them in a place to get shot. But just getting pushed right off the board, that feels awfully harsh. But then again, I mean, I feel for the opposing player, but Luke or Vader, the Emperor, is the one that has to push you. And 2 of those 3 move really slow. So if you happen to be on a board edge, you saw that guy coming, you probably should have moved pretty quick.
It's a pretty easy thing to dodge as long as you're aware of it, but it can create those experiences. So we'll see if they decide to tweak it in the future. I don't think that they will, but you never know. Speaking of tweaking things, we got a new rule book with a few new things that we want to talk about. So we wanted to pick a few things, 2 things from each of us that we really felt were new, interesting, and helpful in the new rulebook, with the caveat that we're not going to address things that aren't in play yet. So, the things that affect the new units that haven't been released yet, we're going to let those things lie, and we'll talk about those mechanics when those units are actually getting released and getting ready to come out. So, Ben, what did you find in the rulebook that you think is worth talking about?
I think they clarified the way that ground vehicles and line of sight and emplacement troopers are going to be treated as area terrain. I like area terrain. It allows you to kind of move some terrain pieces kind of off, but still gives you the light cover in case you need to see something. It creates more difficult terrain on the table, which I like a map that's going to utilize all the things, not just heavy cover. When determining cover provided by one of those units, ground vehicles or emplacement troopers, you treat the unit's base as the outer edge of the terrain and the highest point of the unit mini as the top of the terrain, and that's what provides cover. So in placement and walking vehicles, they're going to give you light cover if you're behind it. Wheeled or treaded vehicles, which we don't have yet, they'll provide heavy cover if you're standing behind those things. That's a nice rules clarification, but also fixes some things that are about to come out.
Yeah, so not like, you positioned your Vader underneath the ATST's legs, and since I can shoot directly between them, he doesn't get the cover. He should, because it's a piece of area terrain.
I can clearly see him. He's right there. Yeah, actually, you still get cover just from being behind it, which I like.
Yeah, I think area terrain is something we as Legion players need to utilize a lot more of. I think it helps keep the simplicity of the game moving at a breakneck speed.
It's one of those things I have to praise Tabletop Simulator for, because I think their maps utilize that before I realized I should probably be doing it on my own tables. And so it's encouraged us to be looking at more of the table things that we set up.
Right. Super cool. Super important. I think one of the biggest things that they pointed out, like it or love it, how cover and line of sight work from looking at the top of the model to see if any part of the model is obstructed, whether it gives cover or not. So instead of just measuring base to base, which I did kind of like because it was quick and dirty and you could do it with a flash and there wasn't any real room for argument or debate, at least we have some clear defined rules that you look from the top of the unit to see if any part of the mini is obstructed. Then if any part of the mini of it is obstructed, even if it's like his left shoe, whatever's obstructing, it has a cover value. And that provides that much cover, not like, it's covering 3/4 of him, so it's light cover, but if it was covering half of him, it would be heavy. It's just that thing has a cover rating, not obscured or obscured, it gets cover, and we can now at least use height tactically, but still kind of have quick and dirty and fast rules. I think that's some clarifications that the community were really asking for, and it's nice to hear that FFG listened.
The community really wanted it. I'm not one of those guys. I think I agree with it. It seems weird to me to measure from a place where there's clearly no weapon, because on the ATST, the weapon is much, much lower. But I do get it. It also means you're probably not going to get cover on an ATST or T-47. It's so far up there, for it to be obscured would be awfully difficult.
Yeah, you have to be really close to what you're hiding behind.
Something that I think is important to note is the new rules for area weapons. For those of you who played other minis games or blasts or AoEs, things like that.
Do they have that in Shadespire?
No, there are no AoEs in Shadespire.
Good. We didn't want to know anyway.
Yeah, if it has that yellow attack range symbol, that means if this weapon is triggered, it hits everybody in the range, not just who's triggered it. So right now, the only application of that is the minefield condition. So there's like somehow 2 troopers have been in range one of a mine and not set it off by those die rolls. You could throw a guy in there, try to set it off, and blow everybody up. It affects everyone, so these weapons are going to be pretty powerful, I imagine, once they come out with the scouts and commandos throwing bomb packs around.
Should be pretty cool. I can't wait to see how else they can use that. Even though we were chit-chatting, there's an example in the rulebook of a range 4 area weapon, and I'm terrified to see what that is.
I so want to see one. I don't know what it would do. It would hit everything, but I want it.
It's the Death Star firing a test pulse.
yeah, I guess.
One of the ones that I liked, and this actually came up in a game that Landon and I played last week, is that troopers that are engaged cannot be displaced by a compulsory move. For repulsor's final position, after performing that compulsory move with overlap, it gets a partial move, which means it takes damage. And on speeder bikes, that means you take 3 damage because it's compulsory, which means you've just lost a bike. So you can block up a speeder bike if you know it's heading your direction by getting engaged. Maybe you shouldn't punch Vader in the back of the head, but if that means a bike blows itself up on Vader's body, you should probably do it.
Yep. Mosh pits for the win.
Didn't you win your game with Landon using that tactic by displacing with a compulsory?
I think it was a game 2 weeks before that. But I mean, Landon saw this rule come out and texted me like, I think we played that differently. I was like, did we? I don't know about that. And then I put my phone away.
Speaking of compulsory moves, standby can now trigger off a compulsory move. I know there was a lot of hemming and hawing about this, whether it can or it can't, because a compulsory move is not a move action, but a standby can trigger off an attack, a move, or any action. And since it doesn't call out a move action in specific, it is a move. You can spend those standby tokens. So I think it's going to be really fun to start setting up traps for speeder bikes and T-47s and any other things that we start to get that have those compulsory moves. I think it's going to make dealing with bikes a whole lot easier, because a lot of times the way I just have to deal with bikes is put a unit out there with a dodge token, let them get shot at to bait the bike where I need it, and then come out of cover with the rest of my squad to try to gun it down before it runs away. And now we can play a little more tactically and set up some traps, which should be a lot of fun. I think it's going to add a nice little layer to the game.
The last thing I wanted to cover was that the sabotage and repair action, the card never specifies if it is unit leaders only, but this latest rules reference does clarify when you're doing that action, it has to be the unit leader in base to base, which I think a lot of us assumed it worked that way, but it's good to see a clarification on basically bringing it into line with all other objective cards like it.
Consistency is the key. Otherwise, it's, hey, let me just throw this random dude for my squad way up there. Second action, random dude touches it.
Makes it a lot simpler.
So, John Michael, cue up the music. Now it's time for a trip down to the Imperial Corner, where today's topic here is AT&T. Basically, we're going to talk about the AT-T that we both have access to. So, Will, what's going on in the Imperial Corner? What flavor of the AT that you're using?
I'm using the S flavor, the AT-ST. The big guy's in a weird place right now. You bring Veers, and he really helps its usefulness, but just doesn't feel like enough of an impact. It kind of trottles around, it shoots a couple things, but when one of the leading tactics is just kind of wave at it and then keep running while it shoots at you, it feels like a waste at the end of the game. I will say I've seen a lot of people running the blaster cannon upgrade, but I don't think it's worth the points. I think your real bread and butter, if you're only taking one weapon, should be that 15-point grenade launcher.
Yep.
Adding Ignore's cover does make it something terrifying on the battlefield, but you really have to rush it to get to that range 2 before like turn 4 or something like that. So maybe later on vehicles become more key to certain mission types or something where you could really build like a vehicle-centric list, maybe some sort of repair function from another unit. We'll see. I think the AT-ST can be good. It's just not in a great place right now.
Yeah, I don't think it's done on arrival like the air speeder was, the T-47. But since all of our missions right now are really trooper-focused, I don't think it's in a super great spot. I think it's one that, with a few key touches down the line, can be a real piece, a real powerhouse.
And I think the main drawback is just that you get that dice pool with your bikes too, so those mobile bikes feel a lot more effective than this thing does lumbering around sometimes.
I've yet to play with mine. In fact, Will laughed at me when I showed him my model because I had glued the legs backwards. It looked like he was trying to squat. But when I play against it, that's exactly what I do. I ignore it. Yes, it's going to hit me, but often I can find the cover to hide behind or gets just out of range, or maybe it's only the suppression thing that gets me. The one time I've ever actively tried to kill it and been successful was I couldn't afford to have it eat up the actions I was going to take later in the game. And so I concentrated very hard with everything on that side of the board to do so. Yeah, I don't know that makes a big enough impact for the points it's going to put in. Vader, for the same point cost, is going to make an impact.
Yeah, and without the surges on hits, a lot of times you're just rolling all these surges that you feel like they should hit and they don't, and you get like 3 or 4 hits and then cover, so it's only 2 hits. It can easily get its effect reduced by cover and things like that.
I will say, it doesn't break for a very long time.
An obnoxiously long amount of time.
It's an obnoxiously long time to live, but often it doesn't have a widespread impact. Maybe you could hit more than one unit with suppression. Maybe that would help it out.
I will say one of my favorite moments with the ATST is rolling 3 hits, 3 crits, impact 3 to make them 6 crits, and then one-shotting an ATRT. It was wonderful.
I don't want to talk about it.
Well, since Ryan doesn't want to talk about it, let's go to the Rebel Cave and make him talk about it. Ryan, what flavor of the AT&T are you playing?
We're, of course, playing the ATRT, the best AT blank T. I think it's going to be a very long time before we see, I'm not even going to say a better walker, a better vehicle for the Rebels, because I don't think this is the best vehicle for the Rebels that we could get. It obviously is now because it's that or the Airspeeder. I think the bikes for the Rebels or for the Imperials are better. I think the AT-ST is a better unit that has a more defined place because the unit isn't particularly strong. It doesn't really help with objectives. It's pretty fast, but not super fast like the AT-ST or the bikes can be. It breaks pretty easy. It's only got 6 health. But this thing is efficient. For what you get for under 100 points, the fact that you get the armor keyword, you get a speed 2 on a medium base, you have 3 different weapon choices that all make sense. They all fill a role, and you can bring it all for under 100 points. And you can put a comm upgrade on there just if you need to, where this thing doesn't have like a super specialty role, or it's not rock solid in exactly what it's designed to do. It's so flexible and it's so efficient. It's so cheap and it's still adding threat, adding pressure to your board presence. Dare I say, outside of like maybe a commander's, I think it's the most important piece in the game right now, the most powerful piece in the game, the most, I'm going to say it, efficient. It's a really darn good unit.
You and I were talking a couple episodes ago about a guy who was running them with no weapons on them, no weapon upgrades, and using them well and really liked it and made a strong case for it. It's one of those things that if you decide you want to put all 3 different types out there, you can. And it doesn't eat up all the points of your list. If I want something that's going to do impact, I got it. I want a flamethrower and I want a rotary cannon. You've now got 3 sources of threat on the table that your opponent has to deal with, and you're not even talking about your commander and your troopers who are actually doing things.
The fact that even if it's just naked and you're running it around as a piece of mobile area terrain, I think is super valuable. The fact that you get that armor keyword for 55 points with a decent gun attached to it, or just it can kick things to death. I can't tell you how many Vaders I've kicked to death with it when they've thought they've killed my Luke and won the game. That armor keyword means it stands tall and takes 3 or 4 activations to bring down. It's such a good unit. It's going to be a long time before they come out of my list.
That armor keyword is the most frustrating thing. It's just these little crab walkers running up the board and
there's nothing you can do to stop it. You can throw a lightsaber at it.
Vader can throw his lightsaber.
You get your 210 point Vader to stop and waste 2 turns throwing his lightsaber at it while you've got a whole bunch of rebel troopers behind him. Such an efficient little unit. Go back and listen to any other episode and you'll hear me gush about the flamethrower. I think the other 2 weapons are good, but the threat the flamethrower brings, if you just don't deal with it, the heat it can take off the rest of your army, the pun was intended, is just phenomenal.
I've been forced in Rebel on Rebel matches to send Luke in to go clean up some ATRTs just because I couldn't allow them to threaten the rest of my list. They just pull threat. They are the bigs of this game. It's amazing. So with all that being said, I want the ATTE.
Stop it.
I love it. We're never going to get it. It's much too big. But Captain Rex used it as an RV. It's awesome. It looks like the Rhino Beetle. I want it. I want it.
Ben, it's not an AT blank T.
It's an 8. Oh, I guess you're right, isn't it? Oh.
Theory destroyed. Ben no longer wants this thing.
All right, moving on.
Crushing my hopes and dreams. Normally, we're taking our unaligned system and sort of moving towards map creation. We've talked about it all episode. Go back and look at area terrain. I don't think enough map makers are using rough terrain. Go look at those keywords inside the rules reference guide. There's a lot of things you can do. You can just do it. If you really wanted to, you could just do it in cutouts of printer paper you throw down and say, that's a grassy field. It makes it a little bit harder. Or this is a big old pile of mud and it's difficult to get through. We started using just felt rivers, just felt cut up river shapes, and we kind of shape them around the table, and it forces units to move differently. It makes environmental gear worth adding onto a list if you actually have difficult terrain to have to walk through. It's something that makes people look at how they maneuver differently. It slows down an ATRT. So really be looking at area terrain and looking at rough terrain or difficult terrain to walk through and how that can better shape boards. It'll encourage much different play in groups that you're seeing out here.
Yeah, the big thing I found with area terrain, and me and Will's game, we had a nice big piece of it. I like taking, it was just a kind of a flocked cardboard covered thing with some dried leaves and wood chips and stuff kind of glued to it, with some trees, fake trees put on it that we could then pick up and move. And I thought that was really handy because instead of having to measure, is this unit obscured? Is it covering half the unit? It's a big piece of area terrain. We could move the trees if we needed to for better movement. And it was just a big blob of difficult terrain / light cover. And I think it really sped the game up. And it's something that I would like to see a whole lot more maps include. It's not usually as flashy looking as buildings and barricades, because I think we get a lot of impassable terrain. We get a lot of high walls and line of sight blockers. But if you look through that rules reference guide and try when you're building a map or creating a template of stuff to put at a table, if you want to do the back and forth competitive play placement style, at least something from each of those categories be present in your map. So no matter who's playing on that map, they can try to work some edge, some advantage from the terrain into their play.
Nothing worse like bringing grappling hooks or grappling gear, and then there's nothing to climb. Bringing the environmental suit, and there's nothing to walk through. It helps you get over a barricade. But yeah, it's nice to have all of those different types because it makes at least every list a little bit valid.
Well, we're recording this show right before the big trip to Indianapolis for 2 of our members. What are we going to expect from you guys for what games you're playing and what kind of stuff we'll see from Gen Con while you're there?
So I'm fortunate enough that I'll be, like I said, live tweeting on our Twitter, the FFG in-flight report. So that'll be a fun Wednesday night. And then I am scheduled to play in all 3 maximum firepower qualifiers. I'm really fishing for a spot in Chicago. I go to Adepticon every year. I've been for the past couple. And I'd really like to secure a spot to that invitational to try to win a trip to Worlds, since Worlds is going to be inside only and I'm a tryhard. I'm fishing. I'm going to play all 3. I'm hoping I can get a spot on the first 2 days because right now I don't have any convention hall time to wander around and look at stuff. I'm just playing Legion all day, and then I'm taking some terrain classes at night to try to make a better board. I have high hopes because I've been doing pretty well in our local tournaments that at least in one of those 3 events I'll be able to go undefeated. And I think the other big advantage I'm going to have is, since I am getting to play all 3, if maybe the Knoxville meta is different than what a bunch of other people are playing and there's something in my brain that that's not quite clicking, I can change my list out day to day. I can look and adjust and say, I saw a lot of this as I was walking around. Maybe a lot of that will be there again tomorrow. So I can go and I can tweak my list. And I think that's a huge edge that a lot of other players probably won't get who are just staying and playing for one day. I'm also hoping to keep my team champion streak alive, teaming back up with Chase from Nashville, who coached me in Chicago. He was my teammate, but he kind of just put the reins on me and said, hey, think about the objectives. Thinks about the objectives. I foamed out the mouth and wanted to throw dice. Outside of the Legion tables, I'm hoping we get to see a bunch of Wookiees. Hope we get to see Chewbacca. We don't know that that's going to be the next Rebel operative, but I think we can kind of imagine that, if they're getting an operative and a third commander, we've already announced our third commander, so it's time we get an operative in Chewbacca. And then I'm hoping for some Wookiee warriors to counter Royal Guards. I could be wrong in my predictions. We'll see. Who knows? I don't expect a lot of Legion news, sadly. I think we'll get 1 or 2 announcements, but I think most of the time and attention is going to go to X-Wing 2nd Edition, which I am kind of stoked for as well.
See, I have to work Wednesday, so I'm not going to be able to leave until Wednesday afternoon, so I'm going to get there kind of late. But I've got Legion scheduled on Thursday. Nearly didn't get Legion at all. The list opened up, and people were grabbing events, and they sold out fast. I got lucky that Ryan is a good watcher of the internet, so a good friend, so he found one that was open, texted me, he's like, go do this now, and I managed to get into Legion Thursday. I'm playing the X-Wing 1.0 tournament on Friday, because they didn't announce the 2.0 tournament until I'd already signed up for these things, and I didn't have any time in my schedule, because Legion was only on Thursday for me. Playing Imperial Assault on Saturday. I've got some terrain building things with Ryan that I'm taking. I think we're going to play a very weird role-playing game, Model UN/Alien Invasion. I'm not quite sure what's going to happen with that.
I don't know what's going to happen either. Yeah.
It'll be a lot of fun. I've got nothing scheduled on Sunday. Last year we scheduled something and it was kind of okay, but you could tell the gamers were getting tired. But the hall, wandering the vendor hall was fantastic for me that day. I got to demo a lot of stuff, get an occasional deal like, hey, I don't want to have to take this back home with me. I'll give this to you for cheaper. Also means that some things were sold out. So I'll do most of my shopping probably on Sunday. I'm probably running Rebels. You know me, I'm the guy that likes to play both sides. I like my paint jobs better for my Rebels. I think I understand the mechanics a bit better. Ryan has turned me on to the dual commanders, so Leia is fantastic. I definitely see the value in it. And right now, I just think I will be better prepared for my games if I'm playing Rebels. So I'm against Ryan. I don't think we'll see Wookiee commandos, Wookiee teams. I think we may see Chewbacca. I think that's something that we will see, but I think it's coming from the movies. And the only furry things we saw in the movies, well, those were mostly just, tiny, tiny Ewoks. And so if they give us an Ewok team.
No. Ben, you cannot run 800 points of Ewoks. They're not going to give you Wicket as a commander.
That's what I want. I just want stews of just Stormtrooper helmets everywhere. I'm just cooking the Stormtrooper in that. So
we'll see. We'll see if it's Wookiees or Ewoks. Place your bets now, folks.
I don't know how to feel about this.
Soon we'll have a 3-way battle once we get the new trilogy armies and the prequel trilogy armies between Ewoks and Gungans and the Porg Remnant. And what will this game be at that point?
There's no Wookiee commandos there either. They'd be nothing but, I guess, fishwife warriors. It's like...
Well, guys, when we start talking about fishwife warriors and Porg legions, I think it's about time we log off and call it a show. I want to thank you guys for listening. As always, this is an absolute blast. Thanks for listening to the STABcast. Thanks you to Eric and Brett for sending in some awesome questions. Thanks to our producer, John Michael, for his pithy sound bites and wonderful editing. Until next time, I'm Ryan Slawowski, reminding to keep your fleets up front.
I'm Wilhelm. Been selling my soul for above average dice rolls.
And I'm Ben Fowler. I've seen the light of dual commanders.
Have a good night, everybody. Thanks for stopping by.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
I mean, listen, you don't want to hold that kind of stuff in. You want a good colon that's going to last you a lifetime.
Well, either one way or another, it's going to last you a lifetime.
Remember, John Michael, a good colonic will take you places.